Ever get that, like, oh, just awful feeling? Like deep down, something is very wrong. That's what Kay and Larry Woodcock must have felt when they found out their 7-year-old grandson, JJ, was missing.
Yeah, and to make things even worse, the only clues they had were in, get this, their recently murdered brother's email account.
It's a truly bizarre case, and today we're going to deep dive into the story of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
This case, it's got everything, disappearances, a bunch of suspicious deaths, and a belief system that'll make you scratch your head.
And we're going to be breaking it all down based on the Mommy Doomsday podcast.
Which uses all sorts of stuff, interviews, police reports, court documents, really gets into the weeds.
So Kay and Larry, they're trying to get a hold of JJ, their grandson.
After his adoptive father, Charles, passed away.
Exactly. But Lori, JJ's mom, she's not answering their calls.
Wasted.
Basically. So Kay decides to check Charles's Gmail, see if she can find anything.
And oh boy, does she ever.
She finds an email confirming an Amazon purchase. Nothing too strange about that, right?
Except for one little detail. The item was shipped to Lori's new place in Rexburg, Idaho. And are you ready for this?
Hit me with it.
It was wedding rings.
Wedding rings.
Wedding rings.
So she's ordering wedding rings.
Just weeks before Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy, dies.
Hold on. Dies.
Right.
Like passes away in her sleep.
That's what they said at first, but things aren't always what they seem, are they?
I've got a bad feeling about this already.
You and me both. So, okay, she takes this information straight to the cops. They head over to Lori's new home in Rexburg to check on JJ.
And I'm guessing they find more than they bargained for.
You could say that. They find Lori, Chad, and her brother, Alex Cox, and right away, their stories about where JJ is don't add up.
Oh, I bet. What do they say?
Lori, she says he's with a friend in Arizona, totally safe. But when the cops call the so-called friend, she's like, JJ, who's JJ?
Busted.
Right then and there, the police know something's fishy. They get a warrant to search the house.
But I bet Lori and Chad aren't just sitting around waiting for them to come back.
Nope. By the time the police return, they're gone. Vanished. And they took JJ and his older sister, Tylee Ryan, with them.
Wow. So now you've got 2 missing kids and 2 adults on the run.
And the FBI gets involved. This thing is about to blow up.
It gets even weirder. Like way weirder.
Hold on to your hats, because just days after the police search, 2 couples from Lori and Chad's group decide to get hitched. In Vegas, no less.
Vegas, huh? So these aren't like your average shotgun weddings.
Not even close.
Yeah.
One couple is Lori's brother, Alex. Remember the guy who might have been involved in Charles's death?
Yeah, I remember.
And the other couple is Lori's niece, Melanie Boudreau, and some guy she met like 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks. That's fast.
It gets stranger. The FBI asks Melanie's new husband, Ian, to wear a wire.
A wire? You mean like record his conversations?
Yep. They wanted him to try and get information about the missing kids, maybe some clues about what Lori and Chad were thinking.
Wow. Imagine that. You're on your honeymoon in Vegas, and the FBI asks you to spy on your new spouse. Talk about a twist.
That's just the tip of the iceberg. This whole thing gets a lot darker. And you know what's crazy? Ian actually said yes. Figured he could maybe clear his wife's name, figure out what was really going on. But then, after like 2 weeks of this whole spy thing, he tells Melanie everything. Says he doesn't think she did anything wrong.
Oh, wow. So much for undercover work, huh? Makes you wonder about the relationship, though. Was it real, or were they just using each other?
It does make you think. Seems like they had a real connection, but they were also both really into Lori and Chad's whole Doomsday thing, which, by the way, gets pretty wild.
We'll definitely have to get into that. But first, things take a dark turn. Alex Cox, Lori's brother, the guy suspected of killing Charles, he dies suddenly.
Yeah, and that just throws a huge wrench in the whole investigation. Alex, he was a key player, could have had all the answers about Charles and the kids. Now, poof, he's gone.
Just like that, another piece of the puzzle disappears. It's creepy how even something like, going to the movies or not becomes such a big deal in this case. Remember that whole thing with Lori claiming JJ was at a movie with Melanie Gibb?
Right, and then Melanie's like, nope, wasn't me. It was just a simple lie, but it blew their whole story apart.
And speaking of Melanie Gibb, she told the police about a conversation with Alex that gives me chills. He basically said the kids would never be found.
Oh, yeah, that conversation is super creepy. Makes you wonder if Alex and maybe others knew more than they were letting on, like they were in on it somehow.
So we've got suspicious deaths, missing kids, and a whole group of people who seem to be in on something shady. What was it that Lori and Chad were teaching anyway? What kind of beliefs would lead to all of this?
So according to the podcast, they were into this mix of Mormonism, doomsday stuff, and these weird ideas about spiritual rankings. Like they thought the world was ending and they were like super special chosen people, almost like gods.
Okay, that's a
Yeah.
different. But how does that explain what happened to the kids? Did they think the kids were like in the way of their spiritual journey or something?
That's where things get a little fuzzy. The podcast doesn't come right out and say their beliefs were the reason the kids vanished, but it does make you think about how dangerous religious extremism can be.
Hmm.
Like how it can make people twist reality to fit their beliefs, especially when you're talking about hurting kids.
Yeah, that's pretty messed up. And what about Chad and Lori? They didn't even try to explain themselves, right? Just took off.
Well,
Why do you think they ran?
I mean, it's not a good look, is it? Makes it hard to believe they're innocent. It's like they were living in their own little world with their own rules and they couldn't face the real world
Yeah,
consequences.
like their beliefs were more important than anything, even their own children. Makes you wonder if they were even in touch with reality anymore.
It's a chilling thought. Their actions definitely show a lack of, well, basic human decency, you know?
It's hard to wrap your head around. And it's not just what they did, it's how they did it. Remember how the podcast uses actual recordings and stuff? It makes it so real, like you're right there in the middle of the investigation.
Totally. The police interviews, those 911 calls, even conversations between Lori and Chad's friends, you can hear the confusion, the fear, the growing suspicion. It's like you're piecing the puzzle together right alongside the investigators.
It's super well made, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And the way they describe everything, it's not just audio, it's like you can picture it all happening. Arizona, Idaho, even Hawaii later on.
Definitely. You're not just listening, you're experiencing it. It's a wild ride, and it really gets you thinking about all the crazy stuff people can do when they get caught up in these extreme beliefs.
Yeah, that's something that really sticks with you long after you finish listening. But okay, let's talk more about Lori and Chad's whole doomsday philosophy.
Okay, so their beliefs were all about these apocalyptic prophecies and spiritual rankings. They had this whole hierarchy with themselves at the top, of course, and they were convinced that the world was ending and only they would be saved.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
Mm.
But did those beliefs actually influence their actions? Or was it just like a cover for something else?
That's $1 million question, isn't it? It's hard to say for sure, but it seems like their beliefs did play a role. It's like they created this echo chamber where they could justify anything they did, no matter how crazy or harmful.
It's scary to think about how easily people can get sucked into those kinds of groups. Like they're looking for something, some kind of meaning, and then boom, they get caught up in this web of lies and manipulation.
It's a reminder to be careful who you trust and to always question everything, especially when people start talking about the end of the world and being chosen ones.
Exactly. Okay, so things are getting pretty intense. We've got the police closing in, Chad and Lori on the run, and these bizarre beliefs swirling around. Where do things go from here?
Well, let's just say their story doesn't end with them escaping to Hawaii. Things get even crazier. But that's a story for another deep dive. Turns out Hawaii wasn't exactly the paradise they thought it would be.
Oh,
Yeah.
what happened? Did the truth finally catch up with them?
Pretty much, you can't outrun your problems forever, right? They managed to stay under the radar for a bit, but it didn't last. The police were still on their trail, and the media, well, they were having a field day with the whole story.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what was their next move?
Well, eventually Lori got served with a court order demanding she bring JJ and Tylee back.
Wow, so this was their chance, their opportunity to set things straight, finally tell everyone where the kids were?
You'd think so, right? But nope. Lori, she just ignores the whole thing, doesn't comply at all, and that leads to her getting arrested.
Wow. And what about Chad?
He gets arrested too. And here's the thing, even with the law breathing down their necks, they still don't say a word. No explanations, no apologies, nothing.
It's almost like they were in denial. Or maybe they thought they were untouchable. I mean, they had this whole belief system about being chosen and special. Do you think that played a role in their silence?
It's possible. Some folks who studied this case think that their beliefs created this, like, alternate reality for them, a reality where they were always in the right no matter what. And that's a pretty scary thought.
It is. It's like they convinced themselves they were above the law, above basic human decency. So did they ever, at any point, try to explain what happened to the kids? Offer any kind of reason for why they disappeared?
Not really. They kept saying they were innocent, but their stories kept changing. Like, one minute they'd say the kids were with one person, and the next they'd say someone else had them. It was all over the place.
So frustrating. All those lies and half-truths, it just added more pain for the families who were already hurting so much.
Absolutely. And in the end, their silence just made them look even more guilty.
It's a tragic story. And listening to the Mommy Doomsday podcast, you really get pulled into the mystery of it all. But it also makes you think about the dangers of extremism, how blind faith can lead people down a really dark path.
It definitely does. And it reminds us to be critical thinkers, to question what we hear, and to be wary of anyone who claims to have all the answers, especially when those answers involve hurting others.
Well said. And for anyone listening who wants to learn more about this case, I highly recommend checking out the full Mommy Doomsday podcast. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the truth is stranger and more unsettling than fiction.
It really is. And as you listen, think about how our beliefs shape our actions and how important it is to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.